How do we argue with someone who likes to argue? 跟喜欢吵架的人也来吵一架吗？如何吵得赢呢？Hello， 欢迎来到 Executive Plus 主管与沟通力的 Podcast. I'm Sherry, an educator, certified coach, and style enthusiast. 我相信专业有效的沟通是语言跟逻辑的完美结合。
And I'm Nick, a startup consultant, corporate trainer, and late-night gaming junkie. I believe great communication requires the right mindset and solid frameworks.
我们希望带给大家职场英语的技能、跨文化沟通技巧与其他能帮助您成为出色领导者的工具。
Join us each week as we share our experience, research, and methodologies to take your communication and language skills from good to great. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Executive Plus podcast. Today's episode, we're going to refer back to Jefferson Fisher, the personal injury lawyer whose Instagram we talked about a few weeks ago. He has some really interesting and very powerful yet concise communication tips. And recently he did one on how to argue with someone who likes to argue, but not really. His take on how to handle this is very similar to what we did with the Sean Puri questions, which is there is some introspection and questions you can ask yourself before you decide to engage in an argument with someone who just feels like they're there to argue for the sake of arguing.
Yeah. I mean, we can give you some tips and tricks on how to win an argument. How do you frame? How do you say things? But ultimately, 最重要的是, why do you need to win this argument? So basically, Jefferson Fisher says, you don't argue with someone who likes to argue. And the reason is that, when people refuse to listen, it's because they're very uncomfortable. It goes against their upbringing, their belief system, their experience. It goes against, their moms and dads and grandma and grandparents and what they believed in. So basically, a lot of times, structure or logic or framing doesn't quite work here.
Now, Sherry may find this episode a bit ironic because I have no problem arguing. I love to argue. I will argue about something even when I know I'm wrong. But if you can't beat me in the argument, that's your problem. So some slight irony behind this episode. But it does come back to that, which is a lot of times to argue well is a skill. And there are people who not even argue well, but they do arguments in a way in which even if you win or the other side wins, nobody wins. And so what Jefferson Fisher is really getting into this idea, especially, let's say, in a court of law, there are times where your argument is just not necessary, right? There's either a legal precedent for it or there's no benefit to you having the argument, but the other side will try and draw you into that because either A, they like arguing, B, they can get something out of it, whether it's personal pleasure or legal need, where if you had just asked yourself these questions, you didn't need to have that argument in the first place.
Yeah. And I mean, I think it's really important to make a distinction. An argument could be more of a logical argument, or an argument could be very emotional argument. And I think what he's talking about here is the emotional ones, right? 如果你是在谈判好 negotiation, 通常像这样的 argument, you would try to definitely not win the argument, but you will have a way to communicate with your rivals or your opponent. 但是通常像这样子比较情绪化的这种 argument, 你真的要吵架了。有很多的一些问题你是可以先问问自己的。
The first question that you can really think about and ask yourself is, why do you need to win the argument? And this comes back to one of Sean Puri's questions that we talked about in a previous episode of the, if I wasn't doing this already, would I still be doing this? Just from, at least in my mind, it pops back to that idea of weighing the outcome. Meaning, even if I do this to the end, I have this argument, let's say it's 3 hours later, and somehow I get my logic, I get my point, and I get the other person to change their mind. Doesn't matter. And there are a lot of times where A, the 3 hours it would take to get to that point in a perfect scenario were not worth it. Yeah. Or B, it doesn't actually matter. So identifying when it matters and identifying when it doesn't matter is really important. And sometimes it's something that you, the person who is being argued at, have to make that consideration because the other person has already chose the argument.
Exactly. And speaking of which, you know, when you're arguing with someone, they are feeling uncomfortable. And actually, why is this making you feel uncomfortable as well? The fact that you're having this argument is because you are feeling this discomfort, right? This goes against your upbringing, your experience, your belief system. That's why you're having this argument. Then ask yourself, why am I doing this? What is the outcome that I want? What do I want to gain from this argument? Or even a better question, what am I going to lose from this argument?
Making that consideration and asking yourself that at the beginning of every argument is just a good practice. And that can also be true for other decisions that you need to make. So there's a lot of times that we may look at what we need to get done today, or someone will bring you a decision and you have to ask yourself is this even decision mine to make, or why do I need to make it? This is something as managers that we've had to face a few times where maybe another department made a request of our team and our team immediately brought it back and be like, oh, someone made this request. Do we need to make this decision or we need to do this thing? And then the first question Sherry and I ask would be like, but why do you need to make that decision? Why do you need to, did you ask them why it's suddenly your responsibility? Right? And sometimes the answer is like, no, we're actually not the right department to be asking this question to. And that's that balance is like, yeah, it's good to have a sense of responsibility. It's good to want to help people. But sometimes you have to just go back and be like, is this my decision to make? Or is this an argument that I should even be getting into?
And sometimes you want to argue because you're afraid of something. You're afraid of losing, or you're afraid of losing your face, maybe. And why is that? I think by thinking about all these questions that you're more aware of where it comes from. 那我觉得其实它会让你心情比较平静一点，并不是所有的 argument 你都必须要去参与的。A lot of arguments has actually, you know what? Majority of the arguments have nothing to do with you. Nothing to do with you. Which I think it brings me back to this episode that we did, 150 and 151 on 跟不能沟通的人要怎么沟通。那我不知道大家还记不记得，我们特别讲到 Dr. Romney， 他是一个心理学的专家。我们在 Premium 的时候也讲到这个部分，因为我真的觉得这个 information 是非常非常实用，我很希望所有的人都能够了解。就是说在职场好了，你可能刚刚认识这一些人，你共事还没有多久 ，Yeah， 你跟这个人有一点 argument 的时候，你可以做一些 self-reflection。但是如果呢，你会发现某一些人就是很喜欢吵架，就是完全不能沟通，不管你怎么跟他吵，他永远不会认输，或他永远不觉得他自己是错。Then what do you do in that situation?
So looking back at these other kind of methodologies like DEEP, where this is actually more of an automated response in the case of Dr. Romney, which is this person constantly engages you in arguments that maybe you don't need to have, or maybe you know that they're not going to change your mind. So you can use this type of methodology to push back.
Yeah. Again, like don't defend, don't engage, don't explain, don't personalize, right? 我们刚刚有讲到personalize 这个部分。So 如果今天你碰到的这些人是真的是无法沟通的人，他就是让你每次跟他讲话都很痛苦，每次看到他的 email 回应，你都会觉得肚子很痛，或者让你感到很紧张，非常的疲惫的感觉。Then you can explore this method to kind of save yourself from any stress or anxiety that may follow.
There's one more scenario related to this that I want to cover. And I think the uncomfortable situation that Sherry just described, where it's more about the person engaging you makes you uncomfortable, so you need to find techniques or methods to deal with it deep. That's one side. But also asking yourself, why am I uncomfortable, can have even more of a surface meaning, which is someone comes up to you, maybe they're in a bad mood. maybe they're being argumentative, but your first inclination is to argue back. But if you ask yourself, what is making me feel uncomfortable? You may find it something like, to be honest, maybe what they want you to do, you can do, and it's not a big deal. But why you want to argue is because you're tired, or you're hungry, or because you had a bad morning. And so you're immediately engaged into, all right, you want to have this argument? Let's go. Whereas if you step back and ask yourself, it's like, why am I feeling so uncomfortable? Why does this bother me so much? Maybe it's just like, you know what? I'm really tired. I don't want to have this argument. I'm just going to do what they ask. And then maybe it's not a big deal. So before you engage in that argument, you may find out again, is it worth your time? Or is there a reason why you should just, let it go?
And again, if you're someone who likes to have that personal validation or approval, it may just be in a situation where you don't want to lose face, right? 你不想要失去面子. I think a lot of people could relate to that. But then here's another question. Does it really matter? Does anyone care?
Right.
有的时候你自己觉得好没面子，可是没有人记得。Because a lot of times I would think about myself like, oh, 好没面子哦, I don't know that, I don't seem smart, I don't look smart. But then actually no one even noticed that. So it could be just in your head. So I think it's worth to ask yourself that question.
Uncomfortable can have a range of things. It's always worth asking yourself and figuring out where in the range. Is it the person that's making me comfortable? Is it the situation that's making me uncomfortable? Or is it just, I'm not having a great day.
Yeah.
I can just let it go. We hope that you will go back and the next time an argument starts, you can start to ask yourself these questions, considering whether I should engage in the argument, I should let the argument go, or whether this person is even worth arguing with. We'll talk to you guys next time.
Bye.
Bye.
The Executive Plus podcast is a Presentality Group production, produced and hosted by Sherry Fang and Nick Howard. You can search us on Facebook, 主管英文 Executive Plus. You can also find us on Instagram, Communication R&D, and email us at sherry@epstyleplus.com.